Hey guys, welcome to Chapter 16, Section 2, Part 2. Part 1 was about some early battles and the naval battle between the Monitor and the Merrimack. And this section, or this half of this section, is about some battles in the West and battles in the East. So let's talk about some battles in the West early on. So, to kind of like go over it again, the main goal of the North was to gain control of the Mississippi and Tennessee rivers in the West to make it hard for the South to transport goods, specifically cotton. And if they were to do that, they would be able to split the Confederacy in half. This is important because it cuts supply lines and it makes it difficult to transport troops. So the North is going to have early victories in 1862 under the command of Ulysses S. Grant. So Grant is definitely the man in the West. And hopefully that name is familiar to you because you know that Ulysses S. Grant goes on to become a U.S. president. All right, so let's talk about some early successes that Grant has in the West. So he captures Fort Henry on the Tennessee River, and he also captures Fort Donelson on the Cumberland River 10 days later. So Fort Henry, Fort Donelson, two Union victories, both under Grant. Now, Grant has his own nickname. It's not as cool as Thomas Stonewall Jackson, the Confederate leader. It really comes because he doesn't accept any terms when it comes to surrender. It's just surrender and you're done. And so his nickname that he is given is Unconditional Surrender Grant. Not catchy, but it is his nickname. All right, so the control of the lower Tennessee River allowed Union troops to march into Tennessee, Mississippi, and Alabama, which is going to be very important when it comes to splitting the Confederacy in half. Another major battle in the West is the Battle of Shiloh. This is another Union win under Grant. Shiloh was a really bloody 2 day battle. You're talking 20,000 casualties on both sides. The Union does end up gaining control of Corinth, Mississippi, and Memphis, Tennessee, which is obviously going to solidify those rivers. But it was just a really narrow victory. Both sides suffered great losses. Battle of Shiloh, another Union win under Grant. Let's talk about the battle. So fighting began on April 6th when Confederate forces led a surprise attack on Union troops, and it looked like Grant was going to have to fall back and retreat. But on the second day, the Union gets a new influx of troops, 25,000 troops from Nashville, with gunboats on the river, and Grant pushes back the Confederacy on day 2. They withdraw to Corinth, and it is a Union win. Let's talk about one other battle in the West, which was very important, and it happened on April 25th, 1862, with the capture of New Orleans in Louisiana under the command of David Farragut. He was an admiral, and so obviously a battle in New Orleans is going to definitely be Navy related because New Orleans is a port city, and it's very important because it controls the Mississippi River. So the capture of New Orleans meant that the Confederacy could no longer use the Mississippi River to carry its crops to sea. This is a big blow in the West. So in the first couple years of the war, you see that Grant has a really strong hold of the situation in the West. This is not the case in the East. I don't know if you remember me saying it, but the generals in the East, the Potomac, the Army of the Potomac, the Army of the East, it's a revolving door of people because Lincoln cannot seem to get a consistent leader who wins, basically. So the war in the East is not as successful for the Union. One of the goals of capturing the Confederate capital of Richmond is actually never going to be met. The war is going to end and the Union will never capture that. And the Southern strategy of making the North tired of fighting was actually working. So I don't know if you remember, Irvin McDowell was replaced by General McClellan. And McClellan is not going to act promptly on Lincoln's orders to advance to Richmond. Lincoln's going to be like, go to the capital, get the capital so that we can end this thing. And instead of going straight there, McClellan, who, doesn't ever feel like his troops are ready, he takes his troops on a several-week circular route by ship known as the Peninsular Campaign. So instead of going straight to Richmond, he puts them on boats, and he goes this like roundabout way to get there. Definitely not the straightest way. And by the time he does get there, he meets Confederate forces that are led by Robert E. Lee. This is known as the 7 Days Battle. We're going to lose the 7 Days Battle. The Union is going to lose. McClellan is going to lose. Robert E. Lee is going to come out on top of the 7 Days Battle and the Confederate soldiers. McClellan's army was pushed back. The Confederate army was going to be very close to D.C. And even though McClellan had more people, more soldiers, it was larger than Lee's. Lincoln said, continue to go after him. McClellan does not renew his attack toward Richmond. And so Lincoln says, fine, if you're not going to do that, go to Northern Virginia and meet up with another Union general whose name is General John Pope. At this time, though, Stonewall Jackson's troops, they meet up with Lee's army, and they are attacked by Pope's troop on August 29th at Bull Run. This is the second Battle of Bull Run. And again, it's going to be, again, won by the Confederacy. That means they won the first Battle of Bull Run and the second Battle of Bull Run. So those are two big Confederate wins under Robert E. Lee. At this point, Lee's on a roll, and he's going to try and keep going. So this leads us to the Battle of Antietam, which happens in September of 1862. Now, Antietam is actually in Maryland. Now, that is a Union state, and this is what happens because Jefferson Davis and Robert E. Lee are feeling very sure of themselves because they were on a roll. They hadn't lost too many battles in the East, and so Jefferson Davis commands Robert E. Lee to attack Maryland because it's close to D.C., it's in Union territory, and they're thinking if we can beat the Union Army on Union soil, then maybe Great Britain and France would support the Confederacy. Now, this is kind of pie in the sky thinking because at this point, Great Britain and France had outlawed slavery, and they were probably not going to be wanting to support a slave nation, but, you know, Jefferson Davis, Robert E. Lee, let's do it. And so they marched Lee's army into Maryland in September of 1862, and McClellan is slowly following after them. He kind of knows that where they've been, he just doesn't know where they're going, like what is their plan. And so McClellan gets lucky. Now, believe it or not, this is like a total luck thing. McClellan, his army is following Lee's at a very far distance, and one of McClellan's soldiers finds a copy of Lee's orders. Now, this is how this happens. They're walking through a field, and this soldier, this foot soldier, comes across a bundle of cigars. Now, the only people who would have cigars during this war would be officers. A foot soldier would never be able to get his hand on cigars. So he probably thought it was his lucky day. Wow, a bundle of cigars. But as he unwraps the cigars, he realizes that what is wrapping the cigars is a copy of Lee's battle orders. And so this foot soldier probably goes running to McClellan and says, look at what I found. He probably kept the cigars for himself, but he said, look at what I found. I found a copy of Lee's orders. So now McClellan actually knows Lee's plan ahead of time. And if he had acted immediately, he could have maybe destroyed Lee's army, but he doesn't. He's so cautious and he acts so slowly that Lee is able to gather his forces along a creek in Maryland called Antietam Creek. And on September 17th, the bloodiest day of the war, saw 6,000 soldiers dead and another 17,000 seriously wounded. Antietam is known as the bloodiest day of the Civil War. There are a lot of good videos out there to see. I'm not going to put one on there if you want to look at that on your own. It's a very important battle. Now, Lee ends up withdrawing from this battle, even though both sides had huge casualties. And McClellan refuses to obey Lincoln's order to pursue Lee as he withdraws. Lincoln fires McClellan. He's like, I'm tired of you not doing what I say. And he replaces McClellan with General Ambrose Burnside as the new commander of the Army of the Potomac. So this is going to be the third guy. McDowell, McClellan, and now Burnside, all in the first 2 years. So make sure you read the pages in section 2 to coincide with this. And now you can go and do the 16.2 review questions on Canvas. Okay? Again, if you have any questions, please feel free to call me, and I'll see you guys next time.